Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating case study from Yogesh Tiwari called The House of Silent Truths. And guys, this is one of those stories where a perfectly ordinary night, quietly, almost invisibly, changes absolutely everything. Let's dive in.
Picture this. Vikram Mehra is coming home. He walks up to his house in this quiet, sleepy little town in Madhya Pradesh. From the street, it looks, well, completely normal. You've got the warm yellow light spilling from the windows, maybe the faint clinking of dishes. But appearances? Yeah, they can be a massive lie. Because inside that house, the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. It wasn't a sudden explosion or some loud fight. It was just this heavy, unspoken distance that had settled over the place. Vikram thought he was walking into his safe haven, but really, he was stepping into a completely different story.
Fast forward just a few hours to the middle of the night, and that whole domestic illusion just shatters. A crime is reported, and Inspector Arjun Mehra arrives on the scene. Now, Arjun is this deeply experienced, frankly, emotionally exhausted investigator, and he operates with this incredibly heavy philosophy. Truth is not something we choose, it's something we survive. I mean, wow, that right there really sets the emotional baseline for everything we're about to talk about. For Arjun, this isn't just about bagging evidence and filing a report. It's about looking at the brutal reality of what actually happens when the very walls of your home completely fail to protect you.
And honestly, right from the jump, the narrative starts to crack. Think about it. When you hear botched robbery, what comes to mind? You expect chaos, right? Broken glass, forced entry, absolute panic, signs of a massive violent struggle. But the scene Arjun walks into, it is literally the exact opposite. It's almost arranged. There's this chilling stillness in the house. Vikram is dead, but there's no sign of a desperate fight. And his wife, Ritika, she's tied up, sure, but the bindings are incredibly neat, controlled, almost gentle. Plus, Ritika herself is completely composed. No tears. It didn't look like a chaotic home invasion. It looked like a choreographed play. Of course, Arjun's boss, Inspector Deshmukh, is totally not buying into these gut feelings. He basically tells Arjun, look, every crime feels weird at first. Find evidence, not feelings. Which, is the classic clash, right? The rigid procedural handbook versus the detective's raw intuition. But Arjun just cannot shake it. In his line of work, sudden violent trauma breaks people. Actually, scratch that. It doesn't just break them, it shatters them visibly. They ramble, they hyperventilate, they completely fall apart. But Ritika? Nothing. She recited her story about two masked men flawlessly. I mean, almost too flawlessly.
What really cements Arjun's hunch, though, in an outsider's perspective. Enter Rahul Iyer, a journalist who practically makes a living reading between the lines of official police statements. He starts hanging around town, just watching Ritika interact with the neighbors, and he writes down this chilling little observation in his notes. Her sorrow feels performed, not lived. He notices that her grief is practically on a schedule. It only happens when people are watching, exactly when it's socially expected. It's like she's an actor hitting her marks on a stage. The grief wasn't messy, it was highly structured. And man, that is a huge red flag.
Then, about 36 hours in, we get the bombshell that completely obliterates the robbery theory. A constable comes sprinting into the station, totally out of breath, with an update on the stolen jewelry. And guess where they found it? Hidden inside the house. Okay, think about that for a second. Robbers do not break in, murder someone, pack up the loot, and then carefully hide it in the victim's own house. It just doesn't happen. Combine that with zero signs of a break-in and absolutely no rushed escape route through the yard, the whole narrative of a panicked, random attack just collapses under its own weight.
So that brings us to the million-dollar question, a question that completely pivots this entire investigation. Was there someone else? Rahul Iyer is actually the first one to say it out loud to Arjun while they're reviewing the facts, and suddenly the whole lens shifts. They stop looking for some random violent stranger who broke in, and they start hunting for an inside conspiracy. Because Arjun realizes if the danger didn't force its way in from the outside, then somebody unlocked the door from the inside. The threat was already living in those halls. The second they start looking inward, digital forensics just blow the lid off this thing. The investigators uncover this massive trail of digital breadcrumbs, connecting Ritika to a close acquaintance, a guy named Karan Joshi. We're talking late-night calls, deleted messages that investigators had to recover, and GPS location timestamps that put Karan right there, perfectly aligned with the night of the murder. But the wildest part to Arjun? The tone of the texts. It wasn't emotional disorder, some crime of passion. It was cold, hard calculation. It was literally the language of preparation.
While they're building this digital case, we also get this heartbreaking glimpse into the victim, Vikram himself. The cops are canvassing the neighborhood and everyone says the same thing. Vikram was a good, hardworking guy. But then, this one tiny detail keeps popping up in the chatter. People say he'd been quiet lately. Arjun realizes that this silence wasn't just stress from work, it was the first visible symptom of an emotional collapse. You know, silence in a relationship is so insidious, it just blends into the daily routine. We brush it off as fatigue. But Arjun sees it for what it was, the slow, quiet breakdown of a connection that nobody noticed until it was way too late. So, how do you catch someone who thinks they've committed the perfect crime? Arjun's interrogation strategy here is absolutely brilliant. He brings Ritika back in. He doesn't slam his fists on the table, he doesn't scream at her, he avoids direct confrontation entirely. Instead, he just sits there and quietly drops one single devastating fact. We found the jewelry inside the house. He doesn't accuse her, he just watches. And right there you see it, the tiniest fracture in her composure, just a shift in her eyes. For a fraction of a second, the rehearsed facade cracks, because she simply wasn't prepared for the evidence to be found within her own walls.
And with that one crack, the whole dam breaks. Faced with her shattered alibi and the mountain of digital traces, Ritika finally speaks the truth. But it isn't some explosive, screaming denial. It's just a quiet, heavy realization. She tells Arjun, "I never wanted it to go this far." She doesn't even try to deny the facts anymore. She just wraps them in this tragic admission that the betrayal she set in motion had completely spiraled out of her control into something fatal. The lie had simply run out of room, and the terrible reality finally took over.
Which brings us to the arrest. And it's incredibly anticlimactic. There's no loud showdown, no sirens blaring, it's just defined by procedural precision and a suffocating, heavy silence. Ritika and Karan are handcuffed and walked out without a single ounce of resistance. It's just a mechanical surrender to the consequences of actions that were completed a long time ago. As Arjun and Rahul watch them leave the station, Rahul points out that it doesn't even feel like an ending, and Arjun completely agrees. Because the real tragedy, that had already happened, and absolutely no amount of police paperwork can ever undo that reality.
Weeks later, as the town is trying to heal and get back to normal, Arjun writes something in his private notebook that I think is absolutely profound. He writes, "Crime is rarely born from evil alone. It is often born from neglected conversations, emotional abandonment, and the slow erosion of connection." I mean, that just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It reveals the true anatomy of this whole breakdown. It shows that the physical violence was just the very last stage of a relationship that had actually ended long before it physically broke. The crime didn't start with the break-in, it started when the communication died.
Which leaves us with a really haunting question to chew on. How many warnings do we ignore before the silence in our own relationships becomes completely irreversible? What you should really take away from this explainer is a deep, haunting reflection on trust and human connection. It reminds us that appearances can be incredibly deceiving, and it leaves you to wonder what unspoken truths might be living within your own walls right now. A truly fascinating, if somewhat chilling, exploration of human nature. Thanks so much for diving into this amazing case with me.